Students, here is the present chapter what, where, how and when. We are understanding where the people in the ancient times, where the people lived, how they lived and what they did for their livelihood. Keeping all these important points into mind, we have been understanding this chapter, and we also in the last period we understood that there are a few reliable available sources. There is a few reliable sources available for us to uncover all these facts which were hidden in the past of long ago. You might think that it was weird. In this chapter we are going to study something about the past which existed many thousand years ago. It might be called about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago too. You should know that people lived so much long ago also. People lived on this earth, including our country. Even in those times also, people used to do one or the other occupation. Even they too used to search for their food, for their livelihood. And most importantly, we also understood that whenever it came to the point where they lived, most preferably those people in the ancient times too used to choose the banks of any rivers, the banks of the rivers for their livelihood. Most preferably they used to congregate on the banks of the rivers. Why? Because as we know it very well, water is one of the most basic needs for any human beings. Without water, one can't even imagine life also. That is why naturally that same water in the form of rivers attracted those our ancient people too. So naturally they started living on the banks of the rivers such as Narmada, Ganga, Indus, Brahmaputra, Satluj and many others and their tributaries. No doubt the people started living on the tributaries on the tributaries of all these major rivers that flow in our Indian subcontinent. See, as I already showed it to you, in this map, it is the so-called the map of Indian subcontinent or the subcontinent. Why actually it was the so-called subcontinent? But why? Because here we should know that if we are referring to the map of our country of that much long ago, of that much ancient times, means that map, the ancient map of our country included not only our so-called today's India, but it included, along with our country, it included even a few other countries too, including countries too, such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Including these few other countries too, the map of those times existed. We could draw, if we have to draw the map of those times, the map of Indian subcontinent of those times, means we were supposed to include those other countries too, as I mentioned. So that's why it was so called the map of the subcontinent. And in the map of that subcontinent, as we already noticed, those earlier people used to live on the banks of these certain major rivers and their tributaries. So slowly, when day by day or year by years they started living on these banks, they also coming to know they also started searching for their food. So themselves only we may call here gatherers, skilled gatherers, and even the hunters. They depended on not only on the gathering the food, vegetarian food, but on the other hand, they also depended on hunting the animals for their livelihood purpose. Along with that, as much as they started getting themselves organized, they also started learning how to do agriculture for their livelihood. And first of all, they began it with growing the crops such as wheat and barley. Especially those people who lived on the banks of Narmada, for the first time they grew the crops such as wheat and barley. These were the first known crops which they grew. And additional to that, those other people who lived on the banks of Ganga, that is the so-called today's Ganga river, who lived on the banks of that river, used to grow rice for the first time. And we also understood that not only on the banks of the rivers, many of those people, even though it was so much difficult or harder one, many of those people also used to live in the midst of or on the tops of those mountains and the hills also. Mountains and the hills also seemed to be the places of residence or the staying places for those people. See, the hills such as the Garo Hills or the Vindhyas in the Vindhyas way of the central India, and the Garo Hills of the northeast. Even in those places, among the hills and the mountains too, the people used to lead their lives. But one should also remember that leading or living one's lives in the midst of the hills and the mountains, even including the Himalayas, was not at all an easier one. It was not at all an easier life to lead, but very difficult it was. But at the same time, it was not impossible too. But so, whether harder or easier, even they used to live even among these hills and mountains too.